I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning, and I really have no script. It has really nothing to do with my medical background, but I just kind of wanted to possibly go through a couple of life events of where, I maybe have gone a little bit astray or had some questions, and the events that sort of led me to bring back to faith and how that occurred. So growing up in Southwest Pennsylvania, we obviously did a lot of hunting. It was, one of the things that my dad had done and that we had done, and it created a lot of bonds family-wise for us. And, it was so much so that, on the first day of hunting season, there was no school in Southwest Pennsylvania, because if there was, nobody was showing up. So it's something that was really just kind of ingrained, and it's more around the camaraderie, the family, and occasionally you get a deer. But everything else that wraps around that is what's really important. So I grew up in Southwest Pennsylvania where, again, not the biggest guy out there, so football wasn't really a good option for me. So I figured I'd just pick on people my own size and decided to wrestle. So had a pretty good career through high school, won states a couple of times, got a scholarship, wrestled at West Virginia University in Division I, had a nice career there, and went to Duquesne University for pharmacy school. Post undergrad, and there I was at a party one night, and I met a girl that I had gone to high school with and I hadn't seen for years, and everything really started to kind of click, and spent a lot more time together. After about 2.5 years or so, and I was in my last year of pharmacy school, we decided that we would go ahead and kind of make the big proposition and get married and move on. So we got engaged the summer of that last year, and getting ready to wrap up pharmacy school. We had done a lot of homework, back in our little hometown. A friend of the family was going to sell us some property. We were going to put a more community-based pharmacy up, durable medical goods, early compounding. We had everything all figured out. So going through the ends of that year, we made it through the winter. My fiance at that time was working at a company just outside of Pittsburgh, and she would drive back and forth. At the time, we couldn't afford, 2 different places. I was still in school, and she was living at home saving money. And wow, we, it was just one of those deals where I probably haven't told anybody any of these stories for probably 30 years, but it was a cold January evening, and I usually would come home on the weekends. And with that, we'd come home, we'd spend the weekend, I'd go to church with her, and she was very faith-driven, and then back to school on Sunday. So I get home Friday night, and my uncle's sitting out in front of the house, and I'm trying to figure out why he's there and not in the house. So anyhow, I pull up, I get out of the car, and he sort of slowly walks up to me and, "Hey, Uncle Don, how you doing?" And kind of a somber look on his face. And my folks weren't home. So he said that he had received a phone call that Sarah was killed in a car accident on the way home from work that evening. And at that time, I just couldn't figure out why that was, what happened. Had lots of questions, a lot of anger, really questioned faith. And so I went through a lot of difficult times after that. And after about 9 months, I was still back in Pittsburgh. And a Saturday morning early, I get a knock on the door. And it's my priest. Anyhow, Father Boosie shows up at the door, and just checking in on me. I hadn't been to church for 9 months, wondering if he can help. Any questions that I might have, any guidance he might give, any time that he needs to spend with me. So I took him up on it. And we spent probably the next, I'd say 3-4 months on those Saturdays, either deer hunting. He was a great deer hunter. and or golfing. And it was a lot of time where he would really answer some of my questions and really kind of help me understand a little bit maybe why those events happen, that God's in charge, we're not. So maybe two years or maybe a little over 2 years pass, and again, no relationship, no real desire for anything along those lines. And lo and behold, this girl, Sue Kenyon from Grand Rapids, Michigan, moves in next door to a really good buddy of mine that I went to pharmacy school with. So he introduces us, and it was just one of those events where, you knew it was right. And we decided, we'd go out on a date, try a couple of different dates together. And it was after the third date that really knew everything was right. That was one where there just wasn't a question. So literally in 3 months, we were engaged, waited another year just to be sure before we tied the knot. And 27 years later, 4 wonderful kids later, again, a unique direction that I would not have had if it weren't for those cascade of events. And I probably wouldn't have been a physician. I'd have been a pharmacist. We'd have had a pharmacy in town. And again, not knowing what all would happen. Were we able to have kids? Would she have suffered some other long-term, unusual event that would have been a lot of suffering? And maybe this, again, all in the big picture is exactly what God had in mind for me. So in any event, through that course, Sue is very Christian-based and really kind of helped bring me back in addition and solidify my faith. But then, work starts to get in the way. Work becomes incredibly cumbersome. As an internist, we do okay financially, but we're not wielding steel, those things where, are really high reimbursable rates. So I've got 4 kids, and I got to figure out how I'm going to get 4 kids through life, through college and the like. So I start, sitting on some various boards, doing some moonlighting, started into some research ventures. And all that led to very rewarding career, but it also led to 80 to 100-hour weeks. And, I started to not have the time that I would like with the family. And trying to scratch my head and the oh, woe is me, and, it's, again, kind of drifting away from faith. My Sundays became work-related as opposed to anything that's faith-based. And to kind of culminate that, my father-in-law, who again was one of my hunting buddies, had some property up around Crystal Mountain. We would go spend long weekends up there. Terrible cell service, so it was forced relaxation. It was just a great time, but came down with lung cancer. So went through, I'd say probably a good 11, 12 months struggling with lung cancer, and passed early October 7th of 2012. So now what? Again, another challenge, I think, faith-based overall, with kind of some of the work obligations and, losing my father-in-law and trying to figure out, well, where does this all lead me next? I'm one of the guys that I just tend to condense sleep. I don't dream, or if I dream, I don't remember any of those dreams. So it had been years since I've remembered a dream, probably, 8, 10 years. So 2 weeks after my father-in-law dies, go to bed on a Saturday night, and the dream was very vivid that night. I dreamt I got up that next morning. I went to the woods, and in the woods, it was just a beautiful, crisp Sunday morning. Deer all around me when I got up into my tree stand. As usual, I added a patient on Sunday, so I knew it was typically post-church, so at 11 o'clock, I knew I needed to be at the office. So I'm in my tree stand. It's about 10 o'clock. I'm looking at my watch. There are deer all around me, and I pulled up my string, knowing because I have to get in and see that patient. So I bring up my string, I hook it to my bow, I look in front of me, and there's this beautiful buck standing there. pull back the bow, make a good shot, wait a few minutes, go down, take a look, make sure that actually did happen, sneak out of the woods, get to my truck, go see the patient, come back, get the deer. So I wake up out of my sleep at 5 a.m. and I roll over and I tap Sue, and I said, I just had this crazy dream. I'm going to Church of the Woods this morning. She says, well, I don't care where you go, just leave me alone, it's 5 o'clock. You know, so I get up, I put my stuff on, I go out to the woods, sun comes up, I mean, literally beautiful crisp morning, nice frost, you know, mid-October. Get up into my tree stand, and I start seeing deer, just like it was in the dream. And saw a couple of small bucks, nothing really good, but you know, activity all morning. So looking at my watch again, knowing I added the patient on, and it is 10 o'clock, and it's time for me to get my stuff together and get into the office. So I pull up my rope, and I have my rope in my hand, and I look around one more time because everything was so right, but there's no buck. And I look around, and there's probably, you know, 50 yards between the thickets and stuff, and I would see things coming in. So nothing. So it was almost the perfect scenario. So I grab my clip, I hook it to my string, and I look up. There's the deer, standing right in front of me. You know, 30 yards broadside, just like it was in the dream. And there is no way that deer walked in there, no way. I just looked. So I pull back, I make a good shot, the deer takes off. I sit there for a couple minutes, like, holy cow, did that actually just happen? Down the tree, arrows covered in blood, good shot, sneak out of the woods, go to the truck, go in, see the patient, come back, there he is. So, you know, again, I don't know, you know, my father-in-law, God, whatever it was. But again, when there's questions, really brings you back. And those questions are very easily answered. Since then, there are many things that really kind of happened that, you know, kind of solidified faith. And ultimately, the way this all unfolds is that I have come to the realization that I'm not in charge. You know, God's in charge. There's a much bigger plan in life for me, for all of us. And I have found that folks like yourselves are who we should be reaching out to as friends, as Christians. There's help all around us. And there are people out there that want to help you, whether that's in the ministry, those are the folks you hang out with, but all you need to do is look around you, ask the questions, they'll get answered. So that's my story. Yes?
We got plenty of time for discussion, questions, and I've got one that's always puzzled me. A doc who's a good friend, not a believer, always tells me life sucks and then you're dead. And I struggle with that mind. And he and I talked about it at his dad's funeral several years ago. But why aren't more docs believers when you guys actually understand the mysteries and majesties of our bodies?
That's a great question, Bob, and I think the majesties, that part might be lost. The mysteries, I think, we try to understand. Those are very fact-driven, and that's how we're trained. And I was just reading a recent article which was kind of frightening in regards to the rates of suicide in kids going through medical school and in residency training, which is very alarming. And I think a lot of that is because, it's the long hours, it's the separation, it's the delayed gratification. It seems like work comes first, and then maybe a relationship or family, and then lastly, God. And I think a great example of that is the director currently of the NIH, a fellow by the name of Francis Collins, and a very bright individual. He's a U of M grad. He was the fellow that was tasked on the Human Genome Project. So they figured out the human genome, and they were the first ones to clone our sequenced genome. And after that, he was appointed to the director of the NIH. And he was an atheist and had no interest in faith, even to where he would, team up with folks like Stephen Hawking and challenge faith. And I'm not sure exactly what the event was, but there was something in his life that changed that. And they actually formed a group called BioLogos, which actually is housed and based here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And the premise of that group is where science meets faith. And now he will completely go in the opposite direction for a rebuttal in regards to why faith, should be implemented into medicine and how science and faith align. But I do think it is exactly that. I think we get into the long hours. We get into a very fact-driven, so it's very biomarker-based, it's image-based, it's physical finding-based, it's outcome-based, and you lose that majesty or the big picture. And I think it's all part of the training that we just don't have any of that, and there's not enough time to be well-rounded, and we miss the big picture. Yes, sir.
This is kind of more of a personal question, kind of a difficult one to ask, but I was wondering about it. What impact did the death of your fiance have? I'm sure it had some impact, but on your wife, and just the memory of her,
Yeah.
and how she deals with that, or how you deal with that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, again, my wife, fortunately, she is very faith-based, and, she actually embraced that. She embraced that time that I had with Sarah, and she was very supportive. I think it's to the point to where, and at least initially, I think there probably was a little bit of comparison, with, we used to do these things, and, she liked to do this, and go on these trips or do the outdoor stuff, and my wife currently might not like to do that. She did adapt a bit, but she kind of helped mold me a little bit into a different person as well. But she was incredibly supportive through all of that, and really embraced that whole prior relationship. There was no jealousy involved in that. And it was one of those really unique circumstances that, she was put there for a real reason. And it was almost ironic, but within the third date, we just knew that was going to work. And so it was, she really helped me deal with that. Again, in those early years, she really helped me cope and was just incredibly supportive. So just a really unique opportunity. Yes, Joel? Yeah, thanks, Joel. The one thing that, again, my dad and I grew up together, really with him as much as a friend, as a father, and we really did pretty much everything together. Primarily the reason I went to West Virginia to wrestle was the fact that I knew he would not have to go very far. He could make all of my college matches. We were in the Eastern Wrestling League at that time. I could get home on the weekends, we could spend the time together, and so it was one thing then when I did meet Sarah, met Sue, the one thing that we did is when we decided we were going to come to Grand Rapids, that was a big separation from my dad, and I really struggled with that. So what we decided that we would do is that we would carve out devoted time periods throughout the year, and we would spend those together. So we have a little bit of property in the very southwest corner of Pennsylvania, and a little bit of a hunting camp there. Again, it's in an incredibly remote area to where you can't get any cell service. So again, it's forced relaxation. There's no TV, you know, it's campfires at night. It's just, you know, terrific bonding time. So the second week in November every year, I carve out and I go to spend a week with my dad. And for now, he's in great shape. He gets up and down the hills. He's, you know, very active. But it's one of those things that, you know, that's the one thing that I had been able to carve out. And regardless of what's going on around me, I make sure that happens. Because you hope there are many years like that left, but you never know. So you capitalize on those and just cherish those, you know, each time. And he's just been a great friend, great supporter through all of the life events, and it's just been terrific.
So here's a tough question. November a year ago, thanks to Brian Gettle, we had a fellow here, Scott Melby, and we so regret that we didn't have David and his camera abilities yet, but he sat up here propped up in one of these bar stools, and some of you were here, and he basically told us what it's like to die. He actually did die 63 days later, died on January 22nd. He sat here November 19th, and you could hear a pin drop in this room because most of us have never quite witnessed something like that, where you're talking to someone who, two bone transplant later, is just not doing well and not going to make it. You must have countless experiences with people near death, at death, where some faith occurrence happened. Is that true?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's and it's one I think, you know, as an internist or primary care, you know, you spend a lot of time with those folks, and you don't just see them as one-offs from a procedural side. I mean, you fight many battles with those folks, you know, in the long history of the war that goes on, you know, from the medical side. And there are a lot of cases where I will see people that are just, you know, hanging on, and, you know, you just wonder and scratch your head, you know, how are they still hanging on? And they'll wait till family members get there so there's complete closure. They'll wait till family conflicts are completely resolved and there's resolution until they go away to the Lord. And it's really incredible how you know, people will also come to faith. You know, some people who are non-believers will all of a sudden have this revelation, and they'll come back to faith before they actually pass. There was one as a medical student that I particularly remember. We were in the ICU, had a fellow that you know, had cancer and kind of slowly you know, struggling with his disease and the course of disease and the way that it was ravishing his body. And you know, he was laying there around the bed, had a heart monitor on him. Family all finally got there. And then I distinctly remember, you know, in the background, the song, I think a lot of people sing it. I like Bob Seger's version, Uncle Crack, or some others, but the words around the chorus were, give me the beat, boys, to free my soul. Going to get lost in your rock and roll. And that was going over and over. And, you know, he had this nice, you know, cardiac rhythm. And as that chorus kind of just played over and over again, slowly kind of faded, flatlined, and passed. And, but there are a lot of those to where, you know, you just see the families and the individuals that, you know, have those kind of, you know, really rewarding and reinforced kind of events that happen at the end of life. Yes?
Yeah, you talked about dreams and the fact that you couldn't remember them. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to have dreams, and I would never remember exactly what they were. But then situation, I'd be like, oh, I've lived through that, oh, I remember this, and the dream would come flooding back, and I would know, I know what's gonna happen here. So, and I'd heard this theory one time, and I don't know if you've heard about it, but where time, everything in time is, there's no beginning, there's no end, so time has already actually happened, and we're just, we're on a certain place in time. Everything has already happened, we just haven't lived through it yet. And I thought about it, and I thought about dreams, and I'm like, well, how can you have a dream? Of all the bizarre things that happen in a dream, how could it actually come true? It's impossible. So I was wondering if, because of this dream and this experience you had, does that give you any spiritual insight into anything different about time or?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. It was really, it was unbelievably ironic how true, to the minute, like you say, that dream actually unfolded, from that night before. It was absolutely 100% right on spot. And, I don't know a lot of that, time-based course. But at least from the faith-based side, with my father-in-law passing 2 weeks prior, being a big outdoorsman, me kind of drifting a little bit with all the work-related obligations. There was no way that deer walked in there. I had my rope in my hand, my bow. I looked all around because that was the only piece that was missing from the whole dream, and he's not there. It took me 2 seconds to look down, clip it to my rope. I look up, and the deer's there. So I don't know. It's just a God thing somehow for me on that whole process, and it was, just powerful. Yes.
Yeah, it seems like between your father-in-law and your real father that those relationships have been especially important to you throughout your life. Could you maybe go into a little more detail about just what having that strong male relationship, having that support, first your father, then your father-in-law throughout your life, how that's helped you become the man you want to be and help you pursue the faith life that you want for yourself?
Yeah, I think you summed it up very nicely, and I think that's so true. I think, being able to spend those times with my father and my father-in-law and, a male kind of influence on life, that it was incredibly helpful for me, not only as a father, because I think it's helped me make that same bond with my children, both the daughters and sons. But it just gave me, such value and much more meaning. Whereas like my father-in-law passed up a lot of unique opportunities to climb the ladder in the corporate world. But he passed those because he didn't want to uproot his family. He wanted to stay in West Michigan. And, kind of that value-based system that for me was really, very kind of reassuring that, family and faith are first. My dad, who was my elementary principal, which wasn't a good thing, but was just a, again, just an incredible, he's so patient, calming, just terrific insight, and it really has. And I think even for my daughters, having that fatherly figure that's there for them all the time, and we have great bonds. Like my oldest daughter and I, we do the Tough Mudders all the time, and and she's just tough as nails, and it's made me a much better family person, seeing how two different fathers conducted their families, and where values and family are always first. So yeah, that was incredibly important for me, being able to shape my fatherly advice to my own kids, and made me a better husband as well. I think. You'd have to ask Sue. Well, sorry for getting a little emotional during some of that. I don't think I ever told anybody that story.
Please don't apologize. So drilling down a little further, Dana, this actually involves your father-in-law, but in 1980, Dana and I were working together, started working together, and did so for most of our careers. And his father-in-law is the gentleman who kind of gave me an opportunity start a business within a business, and had a lot of respect for him. Frank wrote nice. And so it came that he was diagnosed with leukemia. And he died in April of '93. And is Jan your cousin? So his cousin, my memory, you have to correct me. His cousin takes a leave of absence from Spectrum, where she was a nurse, then Butterworth probably, I don't know. And she cared for Frank at home. And Frank died at April 6th. So we're at the funeral home. I'm talking to Jan, and like, you know, how are you doing? How did it go? I'm kind of down to ask, but she said, you won't believe what happened. I was standing there with him, and he basically very clearly said, Angel's here to pick me up. I gotta go. True story. And, you know, fell to the pillow, gone. And so you sit here and say, wow, he seemed to have a very focused moment of being picked up, and I'm leaving. Have you encountered
Yeah,
those types of things?
absolutely. And you know, it's amazing the, you know, it makes one, I think, stronger when you hear those kind of stories. And they happen, you know, over and over again. And it is just incredible when you hear those kind of things. And you'll have people who, you know, they'll tell you, you know, they can hear you, talk to them, even if, you know, they don't speak. And that's so true. So, you know, in those kind of moments, you know, we certainly encourage family members to continue to speak with, hold their hand, you know, all those things that they hear you. But there'll be times where, you know, people will just, you know, where they've been completely almost comatose for a day or more, will just have these moments of clarity where, you know, they just, you know, kind of wake up, give you a statement such as that, and then they just, and then they're gone. So yeah, no, I think those things happen very frequently, and you know, it's amazing just even in the volume of patients, because we only have a confined amount of patients, because that's all that you can see and be effective. But I've had that happen numerous times over the years, and I've also really come to appreciate family members, because a lot of times there are a lot of caregiving tasks that go along with ill patients. And it's amazing how families and individuals and friends all rally around and make sure that there are no stones left unturned. They do what's necessary, and it's very humbling.
Not really a thought that I've ever had before, but you seem like a person who's seen a fair amount of people depart. Just wondering if it ever feels different when someone has a different religious background.
That's a great question, and you know, I think, you know, up front, when I first, you know, started, you know, it wasn't that you know, that I took a little bit of a different approach, but you know, I think at times when everything got really busy and I kind of got overwhelmed and I sort of lost a little bit of direction, that it wasn't that I was, you know, cold or, you know, not caring per se, but you know, it was more of the same. It was something that I expected. When people get sick, eventually they pass, and it's just part of life. And there are different modalities of that celebratory component of life. You know, some have a lot of remorse where they wish they would have spent more time, where, you know, there may have been some bonds with that individual and or other family members that weren't solidified when that person passed. So it's kind of interesting just from an individual standpoint in faith, where some people maybe didn't have that faith or didn't have the relationships. There are different cultures that certainly react very differently. Some just start with a celebratory component of life, and others will have more of a grieving, some anger maybe even, and then kind of will kind of, you know, digest that and then have that life celebration from that individual standpoint. So my story tends to be more of the same when I kind of talk with the families, but it is different. But I think eventually, you know, we come to some resolution to eventually celebrate life and appreciate who that person was, why they were here, what positive influences they were able to cast upon those family members and population in general. But it is a different experience with some of the cultures. And not any real good specific, but there definitely are differences in the way that they celebrate life.
The dream that you had must have had a major impact on you. I'm sensing that from your story. Have you come to any conclusion what God was wanting you to feel or what message He was giving you?
That's a great question, Steve. I still don't have that completely answered, but I do know that, again, as I was having some questions and the oh, woe is me type thing and, kind of getting lost in work and kind of losing the big picture, that He not only brought that picture back, he brought it back with incredible clarity. And I think that clarity is what maybe is now kind of driving me a little bit more into where we're going. Not necessarily with the research. Partnering with Mercy Health has actually been very good for me. It's a very faith-based organization. There are no stones left unturned. Everybody gets care, no matter what. If you look at major organizations around anything hospital-based, 1% to 2% of their monies go to community benefit. Mercy Health, 8% goes to community benefit, taking care of those folks. And it may seem 100% counterintuitive that I now am doing concierge medicine. So we're taking care of folks who have the means to pay for this and not those that don't. We've developed a very robust program. I think it's very personalized. But the unique thing is we base this around the Sisters of Mercy. So every dollar that comes into that program, 10 cents, and all profits, again, we just took standard salaries, all profits go to the Community Benefit Board. The Community Benefit Board then allocates those dollars, whether it's small grants around town to mission-based driven organizations, or I think this year they might be building a respite care center for the homeless. But again, it sort of ropes everybody back in that helps the stewardship. And just for me really to see the big picture and realize that my mission here is based around God's will. And yeah, it was just incredible. After that, I was a totally different person all over again.
Bill, I was going to say one more thing. I don't know if it resonates with you at all, but when you told the story to me, I had a sense that God would want us to know that these relationships that we have with people that are deep and meaningful, where we really feel and care deeply for someone and share, God's goodness with them, that He would really want us to have and wanted you to know that He was blessed by the way you cared for each other, and wanted you to have a sense that something that He created, the outdoors, this beauty, animals, and just your love, your passion for that was something that He loved about you and wanted you to know that and have a sense that it was a time in your life that you could really benefit from feeling that and hearing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. And just on the first prelude side of that too, it was I probably, and again, when I talked to Bob, I was going to kind of focus on the hunting experience. But something told me I needed to tell that first story about the death of my fiance, and that was really hard. And I never told that story to anybody before, and it's just really important, I think, for me, closure-wise, and how again, when you just start to lose a little bit of faith, and you have those questions, there are so many people out there that can help you. Obviously looking at God, but looking around you. And the support that I got, from my priest, from my family, from my friends, from Sue, I would not have made it. I'd have been a very different person.
Bill, you talked a lot about your relationship with your dad and your father-in-law, and it sounds like even with your kids. And while you've touched on different pieces of your story this morning, if you were to write a prescription right now for, because a number of us either have kids, grandkids, young, old, starting families, have kids all over. What are the 2 or 3 things that you think are critically important for establishing a really good relationship with your kids and or with your parents? As a takeaway that, if I said 1 or 2 things that just you think are critically important.
I think that prescription would say prioritize life. And I think that prioritization would be, to really put family first. And, I know work is busy, all these crazy contraptions, you can run, you can't hide. It's hard to break loose, it's hard to let go. I would encourage everybody to take that vacation, whether you leave your cell phone and your iPad and your computer at home, or you go to some remote spot that you don't have access, because it's absolutely liberating. I think making sure you don't let go of faith, that we know we are here as stewards of God. Our mission has already been defined. We have no control over that. And when things don't seem to go the way that you would like them to go, ask. Ask God, ask your friends, ask your Christian friends, ask your minister. There are answers out there. And then finally, work comes into play. And the one thing that money can't buy is it can't buy your health, and it can't buy that family back. So I would think, I would say prioritize life is what the prescription would read. Yes, Rick?
So much of your story I can relate to. I grew up in the same type of environment with family, my father, my uncles, my father's brothers, even my mother's brothers. Opening day of year season was just this huge event, and it was so enjoyable. And it came down to family and that relationship you're talking about, Bill. And it kind of shaped my life. And we all have this special spot to go to, from a Christian's perspective, to have that relationship with God. And I think there's a lot of times that you find that when you're sitting in a tree stand.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't, not necessarily, if some of us don't hunt in here, do we have to go get in a tree stand to get that, but we have other places. And I can tell by your story, I mean, I've had the same dream you had, but I've never had that big guy walk up. I'm still waiting for that but I can still relate to your story. I was in Iowa this week, and I had a similar moment, but it's a place that I find where I do pray, and I find that peace, and I enjoy the part about your phone not working and kind of forced relaxation, because we're men and we are driven to do our work and to accomplish and do things and care for the family and stuff, and sometimes we get pretty wrapped up in that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also tell you I appreciate your passion for the outdoors, and my wife often reminds me, don't make it an obsession.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, I appreciate your story.
Yeah, thank you. And I completely agree. And it's almost like some of that is religion, because and it is. I mean, like you said, hanging in a tree, appreciating nature and, what God put out in front of us. It's a moment of significant clarity. And again, I agree. I do a lot of praying and a lot of resolution out there. And it's just a wonderful opportunity that we have. Yes?
Just share something along your line. I was going to go elk hunting probably 6, 7 years ago, and I was going to take a week away from the family, and it was going to cost a lot of money. And as I'm kind of driving up to the camp, I just started wondering, what am I doing? Why am I wasting my time? I should spend time with my kids. I should be spending this money, I could give it to a mission or whatever, and I'm just praying. All of a sudden, Papa says, Alan, I really enjoy hunting with you. We're gonna have a great time, let's go.
So true.
So it's just, he enjoys us doing things like that.
Yeah.
He's there with us.
Absolutely.
Sharing his community with us.
Yep.
I didn't get one like that either. That hunt.
Yeah, that was weird. That was a good deer.
Any last questions? We've got a few minutes. You know, we're talking about another dimension here that none of us will understand. And, you know, the Bible talks about the spiritual world and all of that, and this dimension that we really can't understand, the dream world, but whatever. But I think what is really clear is if you don't take time to slow down, to stop and listen, you can't hear that dimension from God. And I think that's a huge message, because I think there is this world that, whatever it is that we can't explain, God's there, and He wants to answer our questions. He wants to lead us, but if we never take the time to stop and listen, we're never going to hear it. And I appreciate that piece that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So, to that whole thing, do you think that God then takes that opportunity, I guess, since we have so much clutter in our daily lives, right, and it's just constant noise, that He goes, you know what, if you're not gonna listen while you're awake, I'm gonna actually communicate with you.
Yeah, you know,
in your dreams?
I think Charles Sanders said something in a series on listening to God. He says, God will whisper, and if you don't hear, then He taps you on the shoulder, and you still don't listen, and then He yells at you. So eventually it basically says, I'd rather hear it before He's yelling and a crisis occurs. Most of us, a crisis, something super negative happens before we hear it. And I think He's talking to us before that, but we're too cluttered to hear it. And so I think one of these things that we as men need to do is to learn how, at the least negative consequences, to hear God and His declaration. So I think He does enter it in through dreams, you know, and other people that have certain voices. And for me, I'm the same way. I grew up not necessarily in West Virginia, my dad did, so but yeah, you know, with the woods, and if I'm not in the woods, I don't hear God, you know, except for my wife. But anyway, you know, it's one of those things that you have to have that time to really, where are you and your personality? I don't think the wood's the only place. It can be
You bet.
in a coffee shop by yourself or whatever. And we just need to take that time to hear the whisper before He yells. Good reminder. Many years ago, very early 80s, the guy who kind of woke me up and led me to faith was sitting right here today now, and got me launched in a certain direction. And one day, thanks to Larry back here, we went to the same doctor, and I'll just guess it was 82, 83, 84, and I was one wound up dude. Started this business, May 1 of 80. And
That's kind of a surprise, Bob.
I go to the doctor, and he says, come here. And he sits me down in his office, and he said, and he starts writing, and I said, you write me a prescription? And he's like, yeah. So he writes it, and it's a book. He said, I want you to read this book, because you're going to kill yourself. And it's called Hope for the Flowers. Your wife has it right now. And it's about a little caterpillar named Stripe. And Stripe has got to get to the top.
Right reading level, too.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I understood. So, and actually, I know that book. It is profound. It's profound. It is profound. Yeah. Because he's like, you're going to kill yourself. You got to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting.
By the way, God plays golf. Not just
He did through our priest. I tell you, that guy made some shots that were impossible. I have no idea. He definitely had some help out there.
Any last questions for Doc Baer?
Yeah, I've been trying to get this one out.
probably down to 50 to 60. And liberating 30 hours a week has been absolutely incredible for me. And try to be a reasonable time efficient manager before, and now I kind of sit around thinking like I should be doing something, and I have time to spend it with the family and the kids, and I'm not missing events, and it's been incredible freeing up 30 hours a week.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, guys.